Hello, this is Hallie Warner, Chief of Staff at Adam Hergenrother Companies. I am fascinated by how founders and leaders work together with their right-hand partners to turn ideas into action and build wildly successful businesses. I myself have worked alongside a multi-passionate visionary leader for over 10 years, actually over 11 now, growing multiple thriving companies along the way. We actually wrote a book about how we have leveraged our strategic partnership to achieve success called The Founder and the Force Multiplier, which you can find on Amazon. Today, I wanted to bring you another real-life example of a Founder and Force Multiplier partnership. My guests today are Lucy Brazier and Franziska Lielje, Office Manager and Executive Assistant. Lucy is the founder of the world's leading global publication and conferences for administrative professionals called Executive Support Magazine and Executive Support Live. Lucy is known globally for her years of leadership and dedication to the development of administrative professionals and to changing the face of the profession. Her passion is for the assistant role to be truly recognized as a career and not just a job. I'm totally with her on that. She has spent much of the last 10 years training and running events for assistants around the world, campaigning for a clear global framework for career progression and educating executives on how to best use their executive support functions. Her formidable training expertise and speaking style have given her opportunities to train, present, and MC events in over 50 countries at over 450 events to date. Lucy's vision for her business has always been about delivering the best training available to all four corners of the world. Her belief that publishing is about innovation and multi-platform delivery combined with a healthy respect for holistic information and traditional print values has resulted in the creation of a powerful global community who are changing the landscape of their own profession. I can attest to that. I've known Lucy for many years, and the work that she is doing is incredible. Fran is the office manager and executive assistant to CEO Lucy Brazier. Fran has worked as an EA in Germany and as a marketing officer in Jordan, among other administrative roles throughout her career so far. And because of her enthusiasm towards different cultures, traveling, and supporting others, she found her passion for supporting the administrative profession when she met Lucy and joined the team in Spain in November of 2020. Fran is a hardworking young woman with eyes and ears everywhere, making sure that things around the office run smoothly, freeing up Lucy's time and having her back, while equally helping the team be the best that they can be. You can learn more about Lucy and Fran and their work at executivesupportmedia.com. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to get more tips for how founders and force multipliers can work best together by hitting the subscribe button below, and let me know what you think of this interview in the comments. Thanks for watching. Hi, thank you, Lucy and Fran, so much for joining me today.
We're delighted. Thank you so much for having us, Hallie.
Yeah, Lucy, I feel like I've known you forever, but Fran, I know that you and Lucy have just started working about a year or so ago. But before we jumped in, I just wanted to say, love the magazine, love the rebrand that you did recently, and been a long time reader and follower of everything that you do, Lucy.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So we're going to do a quick jumpstart question. Who is your favorite fictional character and why?
Oh, gosh. So I'll go first. Mine actually is from a children's book, and it's from a book by a lady called E. Nesbitt, who wrote a story called The Railway Children, which you might or might not be familiar with. Oh. But I read that book for the first time. I think I must have been 12, something like that. But in it, it's set last century, and the father in the story is sent to prison, and the mother and the daughter basically take over running the family, but in a time in history where women weren't terribly powerful. And Bobby, who is the main character in it, is very, very strong and is quite opinionated. And I just think for me, it was the first time I'd read a book where a woman took the central character and was really, really strong. And she's always stayed with me.
That's amazing. I have not read that, but I will be checking that book out.
Yes, it's a children's book though. Well, a children's novel. It's, yes. It's not a picture book.
Very cool. Fran, what about you?
I have recently watched a series on Amazon, and it's called Fleabag. And it's also about a very strong female role, which I love. And she's incredibly funny. She's incredibly raw and very relatable. And I just love the way that she goes through life every single day and how she has no filters whatsoever. And it's just a blast watching it. It's just so much fun and just really amazing.
So sensing a theme, we like strong women, which I'm totally with you on that. So for those who are listening who aren't familiar with executive support media, Lucy, could you tell us a little bit about the history of the company, how it got started, and where you are now?
Okay, so I started the magazine 10 years ago. I'd actually burnt out. I was a publishing director. I'd been in publishing since I was 18. And 10 years ago, I was running a publishing company, which was about 13 magazines and a whole heap of events that ran alongside that, and got to work one day and just went, I can't do this today, and went home and was really quite unwell. And I had this idea to turn a newsletter that I'd acquired in 2003 into a magazine for years. But all of a sudden, I had the opportunity and the time to actually do something about it. And bizarrely and ironically, it was always meant to be something that would give me more time at home. And I figured I'd be sitting working from my kitchen table and seeing more of my children. But very quickly, it turned into something that was entirely different. And so I took off traveling the world. I got invited to speak all over the place. And I have been campaigning for 10 years for the role to be recognized as a contributor to the business. It was executive secretary forever, because that's what the name of the magazine newsletter was that I took on. But in fact, last year we decided that it was time, because we've always been driving the profession forwards, and for some the word secretary was seen as derogatory, and so we became executive support media in April earlier on this year. But I guess really we're training. We do training in print, we do training in terms of events and in terms of me waving my arms around in front of people, but we also represent about 70 of the top trainers in the world and put them into companies as well. So that's what the company is all about.
How did you get tapped into that executive secretary newsletter in the beginning? I'm just curious what sparked your interest in the executive support profession originally?
Well, I originally started as a local paper, and then I went to the Times, and the very first section I worked on at the Times was a section called Creme de la Creme, which in its time was a 24-page supplement, sometimes more than that, for the secretarial market. And the very first trade show I ever did was the trade show that ran alongside that. And in fact, then I was doing PR for somebody about 5 years later who wanted to get into all the press that was secretarial. And I approached this newsletter to say, could you run something from her? And the woman who was running it at the time said, actually, I'm about to close it because it's been wonderful. It's been a blast. But, you know, really, I'm getting older. She was 70, I think, at that point, and it's not something I want to continue with unless you would like it. So I went by train 4 hours away for lunch, and at the end of lunch I walked out with the newsletter. So I think it was always kind of meant to be. All the way through I was working within, well, I'd obviously gone off and learned my publishing skills, but I do feel there's a certain amount of destiny involved, that it was my starting point and it seems to be my ending point as well.
I love that. When did you first hire an assistant? And when did you know that you needed one?
So I had an amazing assistant that came with me through most of my career when I was working for somebody else, Elizabeth, or Bob as she liked to be called. And Bob went back to New Zealand because her father wasn't terribly well. And so I started this magazine. And a couple of months in, Matt and I worked on a local project. The local Chamber of Commerce was putting on Christmas. And that year, that event had normally been about 500 people standing around a tree singing. And we transformed it between the two of us project managing it. He was my secretary on that, into an event that was 8,000 people. And after that event, he came to me and he said, you're drowning with what you're doing, and I could offer you 1 day a week for free if you would like it, because I really would like the experience. And very quickly it turned into a full-time job. So he was with me up until this time last year. He still works for the company. He's now looking after our events, which is what he'd always wanted to do, really. And we were in danger of the narrative taking over, that he'd been with me for so long, rather than him going to do what he wanted to do. And you know, I moved to Spain this time last year as well. So then I started looking for somebody new. And yes, Fran fits the bill very, very well indeed. She has me totally organized within an inch of my life, which is probably what I need at this point.
Yes, yeah. And Fran, tell us a little bit about your career path that led you to being now partnered with Lucy in this role.
So originally I started working in hospitality, and I always knew that I wanted to work a lot with people, not to sit at a desk all day. And I wanted to travel, and I wanted to do something that is actually something that helps other people. So when I worked at the Kempinski Hotel in Berlin for 3 years, and I learned about all different departments. But in the end, when I left the Kempinski Hotel, I started working for my parents' company for a while as an executive assistant. And then I went to Jordan to get some other experience on working outside of my comfort zone, outside of Germany, in an Arab country, which was very, very interesting. And then came back and did another executive assistant job at a quite big event location. And so I just slid into the executive assistant role, which I really loved, because you could really see the value of an assistant in a company, which I wasn't aware of, to be honest, at the time. So it was really amazing to see that part of it. And then when COVID hit, I moved to Spain, originally just to visit. And then I thought, why not to pursue something over here? And then Lucy was there. And so I decided to apply, and then we started working together.
Very, very cool. So being an EA for you has been a real career choice. It sounds like you've pursued that opportunity in many different areas, many different companies, which I really enjoy seeing, because I think we often think that the EA is just a stepping stone to something else, which it can be. I always like to say that it can be, but it's also just for me, just a great career in and of itself. And it sounds like you found that. Yeah. Communication is one of the things I hear, and I don't know about you, Lucy, but one of the things I hear most often for executives and executive assistants that can sometimes be a challenge. So how have you learned over the past year, it's a new relationship, how have you learned to communicate most effectively? Is there anything that is particularly worked for you?
We have tried so many different things, haven't we? And at one point I'm like, we've got about 3 systems running here. Let's see where we go from here.
Yeah.
But, I think it's that whole norming, storming, where are we? How does it start? Forming, storming, norming, performing thing, where really in the beginning we were very polite with each other. Then we worked out how we thought it was going to work and established what the boundaries were. And then from there, we've really fallen into a rhythm. And now every day, Fran comes saying, I have questions. And she has all the questions on Microsoft Planner, and she moves them over as she gets decisions. But she now also manages, obviously, my email, and she comes with questions from that as well. But really, I see behind you your sign that says curiosity. And the thing that I love about working with Fran is that she is always trying to learn more about the business, more about what makes me tick, more about how we can make this easier for the partnership. And it is really easy, because it isn't constantly being interrupted. It's one meeting a day, unless it's really urgent, where the two of us sit down together, usually for 10 to 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And during that meeting, she literally quick fires questions at me, and we come out the other end with her having the priorities for the next day, but also the tools she needs to go and do what it is that she needs to do, which is to make sure that I'm safe, really.
Yeah, I love that. What does that mean for you?
It means I can get on with doing what I'm meant to be doing, rather than worrying about the detail. I can give you a really good example, which is a stupid example actually, but it made such a difference, is that Fran started putting lunch into my calendar for an hour every day. Now, prior to that, I would quite often have my head down and my tail up, and I would be working, and at 4 o'clock, I'd think, I feel a bit peculiar. Oh, it's 4 o'clock. And now it's too late really to go do lunch, because I'll be having dinner later. Whereas now it pops up at whatever time, and I go, I need to go get something to eat. So I always say to the assistants I train, don't be afraid of your executive, be afraid for them. And she's great at doing that. I love it. There was an occasion, I think this week, where she said to me, this person wants a meeting. And I said, okay, great. Do you want to put it in the calendar? And she said, why would you want to do that? This week is insane already. But I love that. I need that, because I would just say yes to everybody.
Yeah, I think, thank you for clarifying that. I could not agree more. I think such a big part of the assistant role, my role, is protecting, to a certain degree, protecting our executives' time, their energy, their what they're saying yes and what they're saying no to, but never going too far as to not allow them to know the information that they need to know. But yes, just protecting, for me, it's really about protecting their energy, right? And protecting their time. Such a big piece. What about any challenges that you've had? Have you had any big mistakes or challenges that you've experienced so far working together? And how did you navigate that?
Well, I think I've only been doing this for a short while, so there's not too much time to really mess things up. But we started working together, being in the same office every day. So we had a certain rhythm. And then when Lucy started traveling again, I think for me that was a challenge, because usually I would know where she is and what she was doing. And then all of a sudden it was new for me that she wasn't there. So we needed to find some kind of consistency to keep those communication meetings, the question meetings up, to make sure that no information gets lost and that she can feel safe traveling, knowing that the office here is working and everything's all right, the world's not burning down, and she can go do her thing.
Had you already instituted those daily meetings at that point, or did you just, or once you started working and traveling more remotely, is that when you started doing the daily meetings?
No, the daily meetings were already there, but I think the problem is that when I'm traveling, quite often I'm either on a train where there's no internet, or I am presenting, or I'm having a special dinner with somebody, or you know how it is when your exec's on the road, right? So yes, finding time to do that 10 minutes every day, and especially if something urgent comes up, working out how you communicate. And that's just going to get more and more prevalent. So we're doing quite a lot of work at the moment, because 2022 is looking insane already. And so we really need to make sure that rhythm is in place, so that I'm giving Fran what she needs and she's able to ask me what she needs too.
Yeah, I think that, of course, when you're traveling and you're in back-to-back meetings or trainings, it's very difficult, of course, to sometimes navigate that communication. But I'm curious, in this newer remote world for many of us, obviously many more assistants are working remotely. How have you either seen that work with each other, or do you have any best practices or tips for assistants and their executives on how to work better remotely?
I think you're right. It's communication. It's understanding that the assistant can only get on with doing what they are paid to do if you do have those meetings. So we've just got to find a way to do it. And it might not be a formal meeting where we're like this on Zoom or whatever, but even if it's just, okay, I'm going to call you on Teams and I'm in transit in a cab, but let's talk, let's do that 10 minutes. Or ask me the questions, send me the questions, and I'll come back to you over Teams. But do not take yourself out of the calendar just because you know they're busy. That, to me, that 10 minutes a day is sacrosanct. Would you agree?
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
Definitely. Also finding one platform to communicate on as well. That's something that I think is really important. So we have everything in one place, and Lucy always knows that if I have something, it will be on Teams, it will be in that chat, or it will be in that file. So we can make sure that we stay up to date.
How have you seen, maybe this is a question more so for you, Lucy, but how have you seen the evolution of the executive support professional over the years, and where do you think that's going next?
Oh my goodness, that's about an hour and a half presentation. But I will try and sum it up for you. So I think, you know, when I first got into it, there were pockets of people doing amazing things all over the world to try and raise the profile of the assistant. And I like to think that one of the things I brought to the party is to pull them all together, so that there is now a global movement, the One Profession, One Voice movement, which is pushing for the way that the assistant is seen to be changed so that their contribution to business is recognized. And of course, you know, all over the world, you had assistants who had stepped up, who were doing amazing things within their businesses, but still so many leaders see it as a tea and typing role and as a job rather than a career. And so we've done an enormous piece of work over the last 6 years, which you've been involved in too, I know, and thank you for your letter in our new supplement for Global Skills Matrix.
Oh yeah, my pleasure.
But Global Skills Matrix, which has come out of World Administrators Alliance, which is something that I've been very involved in since 2015, is a career progression for assistants. It's a global framework for that career progression, which says the skills and the tasks you can expect to do at each of the 5 levels. And what I'm really hoping is that executives and HR departments all over the world will look at it and say, oh my goodness, we are not using our assistants like this. And if that is, you know, the way everybody else is, then really, I think we're missing a trick. But I think moving forward and coming out of COVID, the assistants are the chaos tamers. It's what they have always done, really. They have taken the process and procedures piece, they've taken the ideas their executives have had, and they've applied that process and procedure to it. And there's never been a more important time to do that than at this point in time. Because coming out of COVID, every business wants to know how to best utilize their assistants. And that's because when they do so properly, they are giving money back to the bottom line because they're freeing up their executives' time to go and do the things that they are paid to do. And so the assistant really coming out of COVID has to take this opportunity to reinvent the role in the way that they want it to be, so that they're taking all the things off the executive they've wanted to for ages, so that they understand they have a voice, and especially around process and procedure, quite often they know better. And so that they are taking on more of the strategy and stepping more into supporting the executive and asking themselves the questions where they add value and where they take on greater responsibility. Because there's so much in the press about the role disappearing, but it's nonsense. That's based on the US statistics, and that's coming out of the Bureau of Labor, which only has one level of assistant, and that's the task-based ones who are like the administrator's secretarial role of old. The role now, the EA role, Glassdoor is telling us is in the top 10 roles to be working towards doing, mainly because it's around people, and that's what the future of work is about. So I see a very rosy future for this profession, actually. It's just we have to talk to them about how they understand the role. And a good place to start with that is Global Skills Matrix, which I'm sure you'll put a link into whatever we're doing so people can download it.
Yes, absolutely. And I've been sharing that pretty widely with the the assistant community, the executive assistant community, the people that I talk to, and I'm so in alignment with everything that you just said. And I do feel like at least a lot of the people in that profession that I'm talking to are so on board with this change, and it's what they've wanted for many, many years, and they're already doing. And at least now we have some more common language around it, which is really exciting for me. And I feel like assistants are very much on board with that more strategic support, wanting to be that strategic partner, wanting to make an impact in their organization. They're taking the training that they need, they're reading the right resources, and I think many of them are taking control of their career in that regard, which I think is very exciting. However, how do we get the leaders of these organizations to understand that? Because I actually think it's less about the assistants. They're ready for it, or they're doing it already. How do we get the leaders to understand that a bit more?
I think the Global Skills Matrix is a really good starting point, because so many of the assistants in our survey said they felt underutilized. And when I give the stats around that to the executives and to the HR departments, they go, oh my goodness. Because just think what that means to business. It means that 1/5 of the world's working population, that's about 500 million people who work in admin, are not being fully utilized. So for a business, that's a really big thing. But I also think that with Skills Matrix, whereas forever assistants have tried to push up in their companies and have said, come on, we need to benchmark better, you need to understand the role better, this is what I think it should be. This document is not that. This document is the heads of associations from 29 countries saying this is what the profession is. So that gives kudos to it, and it's beautifully written so that they will understand totally what the role is. And hopefully that will give them an aha moment to say, actually, let's take our administrative function and do the right thing with it. Because of course, Hallie, what every business wants is that world-class administrative function that's underpinning everything that the stakeholders do, and where there's excellence at each level. And the only way to do that is to make sure that there is measurement against performance. And this is what is at the heart of this matrix. It's about performance and businesses understanding the value an assistant can bring. So go download it, take it, talk to your HR departments, talk to your executives, talk to recruitment agencies, because I want it to become the language of the profession, that we're talking about assistants in terms of levels when it comes to training, when it comes to recruitment, when it comes to job descriptions, so that everybody's clear.
Yeah, I love that. I'm so with you on all of that. I work a lot with entrepreneurs as well. So this is like a very it's a newer concept for them. Many of them think there is only one level of assistant. And oftentimes I think it's at level 4 or 5, which isn't always the case when you're a solopreneur and you're just getting started in your career. So I think it's also showing them and helping them understand the different levels and managing expectations for hiring, which managing expectations for compensation and talent and all of that. It's such an amazing tool. All right, shifting focus a little bit. Lucy, can you take us back to some of the early days of your company and when you started out on your, entrepreneurial journey as well? What were some of the biggest challenges that you had starting out?
I think cash flow, always. And that doesn't change, actually. I felt hugely relieved when Anne Hyatt and I had a conversation over coffee, and she said that Jeff Bezos had once said to her that there are only 2 states of an entrepreneur. One is abject terror and the other is euphoria. And I think, yes, it made me feel a lot better. But, I think really that's true. It's always a roller coaster. And one moment you're celebrating and saying, this is just so amazing and we've achieved this and how phenomenal. And the next week you're going, how do we pay the wages? So, I think it's going on that roller coaster and getting to a point where you're emotionally able to say, I've been there and I've done this before and I understand what this means. And it isn't quite so peaks and troughs. That to me is one of the biggest challenges. And recruiting the right people as well. I've been very blessed to have some amazing people working in my company. I've also been not so blessed on occasion to have some that, maybe didn't work out. But I really feel now that we have a team of people that are absolutely on board with what we're trying to achieve globally and who are as passionate about the mission that we've got as I am.
Fran, what about you? When you first started in your career as an executive assistant, what were some of your big challenges or lessons that you learned early on in your career that someone else could learn from?
Well, I think we already talked about the fact that the role is normally seen as someone is calling you to get to someone else, and you're just in the middle, and you weren't really being taken seriously. But then when I started working in different companies, I realized that I was actually the one who knew everything about what was going on in the company. So that was a bit frustrating to just make your executive aware of what it is that you are actually doing, and that you are actually the one pushing the whole business forward and looking towards protecting the executive, but also making sure that the team is all right, the office is all right, the process and procedures are working. So it's really important. And I think acknowledging that and having the confidence yourself to go out and say, listen, this is what the role actually is. And this is what you need to be looking at in order to make it better for everybody else in the company. So I think that was something that when I came to Spain and I had a conversation with Lucy for the first time, we were talking about the cause. And it was the first time that I realized there is somebody out there who is really, really passionate about acknowledging what it actually is that executive assistants do. And I think that's another reason why she has so many passionate team members now because of the way that she is approaching this whole thing. So that is really, really amazing. Really, really great.
How did you develop that confidence to really own the role of EA and have the confidence to have those conversations with various executives about, well, this is the role and this is what I'm the impact that I'm going to bring?
I think it depends, but in one situation I remember it was just that I reached a point where I did everything that I could and more, and it still wasn't enough. And there was a lack of staff, there was a lack of organization, and I felt like I'm just the one-man show trying to, solve every single problem of the company on my own. And I realized that if I continue to do that, then I won't make it for much longer. So I just decided either I leave or I have this conversation and give it another shot. And then we had that conversation and there was some realization there and we changed some things and there was more appreciation. But it was really making them aware because a lot of the executives just go out and do the thing and are not really aware of what's going on within the company. So sometimes they do need a conversation, just a little push, and then it does help.
I agree. I'm glad that you brought that up. I think that as much as I don't always like to have to do that or even tell assistants that we have to do that, we do sometimes have to remind our executives or our leadership teams or boards we have to bring visibility to our role in some way, or more visibility into a role, because they're just off running, doing their thing sometimes. And I don't think it hurts to remind our executives or remind the stakeholders, here's how my role is benefiting you. Here's what else I can do in my role to expand it even more. And what I do find difficult is having the confidence and the courage to have that conversation, but what a difference it makes when we do engage in that conversation. And Lucy, from your perspective, I was talking to, I think, Adam or some other executive about this not too long ago. Confidence comes up a lot, I think, or lack thereof sometimes in the executive assistant role. And I was talking to Adam about this, and executives want the EAs to have confidence. In fact, sometimes when they don't, they may hesitate to give them more or to hand off more responsibility. What is your thought on that in terms of from the executive perspective, and how can EAs gain some more confidence and really show that confidence to their executives so that together they can continue to grow?
I think it's a change in mindset, because I think part of the problem has been that traditionally the role is seen as being a kind of parent-child relationship, in the past. So you've got the executive up here and you've got the assistant down here. And that's what the films and the newspapers perpetrates. So when you actually put both of you on a level and you're collaborating and everybody understands that your assistant has one skill set and you have the other, and that together it's like two sides of the coin and somebody breathing in and somebody breathing out, it's one perfect employee, suddenly it works. But to me, good grief, having somebody who is a safety net, literally like I'm up there on the tightrope and I'm walking and I know that she's got me. So I can get on with doing the things that I need to do without worrying about whether the detail's being handled. And it's such a blessing as an executive to be able to go and do that and not to have to be constantly worrying about, has this happened? Hasn't that happened? And actually what's so great is that she isn't asking me permission either to go and do things. She's just doing things and sorting things out. And I get there at the end of the day, I'm like, oh, wow, you did that. Amazing. And that, to me, an executive might not know that that's what they need because they've never been taught how to use an assistant. The average executive, I think Bonnie Low-Craman's last figure she threw at me was 46 years old. The average executive is before they get training in how to manage people. And so, to me, it's important the assistants understand it's the business that's employing them. It's not the executive. And that actually the business is hiring them to do a role, which is to free up as much of the executive's time as possible so that they can do the thing they're employed to do. And so for me, whether they know they want that or not, if I ever have conversations with executives where I say to them, you do understand that 58% of your time is being spent doing email because you won't give it up. And actually that's 58% of your salary they're spending on you doing email. Why would you do that? Hand it to them, and then you'll spend 12% of your time doing email. Suddenly the light bulbs go on and they go, oh, right, okay, I get it. But it does sometimes need explaining in words of one syllable. And I say often to the assistants, I think you have a duty to your company because you are the expert in being the assistant, they are not. And you need to train them how to use you. And she trains me all the time. I just do what I'm told.
Yes. Yeah. How long did it take you to develop that that level of trust and that confidence in Fran? And what did you look for, or what were the signs that you were like, okay, that everything is going to be handled?
Do you know, I originally hired Fran to do sales, and she's rubbish at it.
Me too, Fran.
And she said to me at the end of the second week, you know, I've looked at your database and it's a horror show. Do you think, you know, if you would like, I can take it and I can sort it out for you. I know how to do that. And I think it was a week and a half later that it was pretty much sorted. And suddenly we had something we could utilize. And I sat there thinking, oh my goodness, okay. And Matt had been saying to me for so long that he wanted to move into doing events. So then I had a conversation. And you know, it's little by little. I think it probably takes 18 months, a year to 18 months to get to a point where you truly are working in that rhythm, where you are the two sides of the coin. But we're really getting there. And the great thing is actually we're just really enjoying working together. We have got into a rhythm now. There's still stuff that comes up where she doesn't know, and I assume she is going to know because Matt knew, and we have to do the, oh gosh, of course you don't know that conversations. But, you know, I think we're both really comfortable with the partnership at this point. Probably took about 6 months to get to a point where I was happy to just get on with it and stop asking whether it's okay.
Yeah, I thank you for mentioning that, the 6 month part, and then even the 18-month part, because I think that is just, I think many executives have a much shorter time frame, an expectation of a much shorter time frame, and that's just, it's just not the reality. You need time to develop that relationship and that partnership, up to 18 months before you're really that one person doing that one job.
Yeah.
So that's great. Okay, Lucy, what is one piece of advice that you would give to leaders or CEOs to enhance their strategic partnership with their assistant?
Communicate and listen and stop trying to micromanage. Let them do the thing, because otherwise you become a bottleneck. You know, treat them like part of your leadership team. Have them in leadership meetings so that they can hear what's going on in the business, because they will have ideas as to how they can help you if they understand what it is that you are doing. I have a list of questions that I would be asking an executive as an assistant. And one of them is, what are your goals and KPIs for this year? And at the end of this year, if it's been super successful for you, what does that look like? And to me, that's almost the most important question an assistant can ask an executive, because if you're not communicating that between the two of you, how are you ever going to know how to support them to get there?
Could not
have those discussions.
Yes, completely agree with that. Fran, what's one piece of advice that you would give to executive assistants to help them have a better strategic partnership?
Well, I would say, first of all, going back to caring for your executive or being afraid for them and not of them, make sure that you have that environment where you feel valued, where your executive actually appreciates the role in itself. So just a healthy environment, first of all, I think is very important. And then also to not be afraid to step up and take responsibility and make sure that you're benefiting the company just as much as the executive and yourself as well, to find a balance between all of those things.
Yeah, what's interesting is, Lucy, you said, you know, allow them to come into the room and have, you know, be part of that leadership team. And Fran, you said, have the as the assistant, step up and show your value and be part of the leadership team. So it's actually perfect complement to each other of the answer that you just get, which is really stepping up, leading, and really investing. From what I heard, is investing into each other to learn and to grow and to continue to move forward together, which I think is just perfect.
Wonderful. Yes.
Definitely.
What
are you both working on next? What's coming up next for you?
Oh, so many things.
What can you share?
What can we share? Well, we're back to live events in 2022. So that's all quite interesting. And that's the first time that Fran is, helping with that stuff. So she and Matt are working very closely together in getting all that stuff organized. And we're going to be doing Global and Tech again next year. But, all sorts of new projects coming up, which if I told you, I'd have to kill you. But watch this space, because we're always trying to push things within the profession, trying to get everybody outside of their comfort zone. I'm hoping next year to get into a lot more HR departments and into a lot more internal conferences to talk to the executives. And my calendar is starting to fill up with some of those, because I think that's the next step. The assistants always say, as you said earlier, we get it. We need you to talk to our executives. And I think that for me is probably the next way to go. But also ISIPO, which is our foundation, which I don't know whether you're aware of, but it's the foundation we have in South Africa. I'm very keen. Just before COVID struck, I was intending to go to India and to Peru and to Brazil to go and talk about setting up similar things there. And obviously that all got put on hold, but I'm very keen to do that, not least because all the charities that I've been talking to who are looking at it as a proposition are saying, there is lots for the boys, there's nothing for the girls. And I have a deep-seated belief that administration as a career is one of the few things that a woman who has no qualifications can get into at the lowest level and then build into a career. Because if you think about it, if you're in poverty, maybe you're going to go and work scrubbing floors or working as a waitress, or one of the lower level jobs which has really not a lot of places to go. But with administration, we've proved already in South Africa that actually it's taking women out of poverty. They then educate their children in the value of education, and it's just amazing. So if we can go and do some more of that in other places in the world, I will be very excited to do so.
That is amazing. Yes, we'll put all of the links to everything that you just mentioned in the show notes for sure.
Thank you.
And where can our listeners connect with either one of you or with the organization in general, just to learn more about all of the work that you're doing? Is there one place that you would recommend we go?
Well, social media, we're on all of social media, but also the company website is executivesupportmedia.com. And you can go there to go and check out all the things that we're doing. But we are very active on social media. Our LinkedIn group is now 47,000 people. So, you'll get all sorts of things that are going on in the industry if you go and join that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both so much for spending some time with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hallie. I have to say, just before we stop, that this is our first introduction of Fran to the rest of the world. It's her first interview, and I know she was really quite nervous, not to mention the fact that English isn't her first language. So thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to show our partnership to everybody and to introduce her so that when people are contacting us, they've got a face to the name.
Absolutely. Yeah, Fran, you should do more of these. I think you did a great job.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.